First of all, I hope you'll pardon my reading this introduction, but I have something I'd like to say, and I want to get it right. Today's speaker is Bruce Goff. I got that right. I'm sure this doesn't come as a surprise to anyone here. By way of introduction, I'd like to say something short and concise that would capture the spirit of Bruce Goff's work. But that's no easy task. Rainier Banham wrote, "Bruce Goff designs houses as though houses had just been invented." Well, that's a pretty good line, but I didn't think I should use it because too many students have probably read the book and remember it. I didn't want to fall back on an old expression Mr. Goff used many years ago when I asked him what he'd been doing recently, and he replied, "Oh, the same old unusual stuff." To phrase my dilemma, as John Bryant might phrase it, trying to find something all-inclusive to say about Bruce Goff is about as difficult as trying to sneak dawn past a rooster. No. Well, the other day I was giving a crit to Robert Griffin and Suzanne Buckley on their thesis project. And as most crits go, we ran into one portion of the discussion where we were trying to decide whether to do this thing or that thing. And as is the case with most designs, students as well as architectural designs, usually if you've got a choice between two things, each thing has its advantages and each solution or each situation has its disadvantages. And we were discussing at the time whether they should do this or they should do that in this particular situation. And after a while of discussion, Suzanne said something like, "We'll use the first scheme. Although both schemes have strengths and weaknesses, the first scheme makes a strong design statement." Now there's a determinant I could relate to in a statement that relates to Bruce Goff's architecture. If Mr. Goff's buildings have a quality in common, it is that they all make a strong design statement. Even the quiet buildings. And I feel that that quality has attracted the interest and admiration of people in a wide range of income and age groups. And more particularly, the group that seems to relate most strongly to Bruce Goff are young people. By that I mean young people of all ages. I believe this is true because if the essence of youth is imagination, creativity, spontaneity, and curiosity about many things, then Bruce Goff is one of the youngest architects practicing today. Would you please welcome Bruce Goff?
Thank you. That was so good, Bob. I wish you'd just gone on and finished this. That would have been good. You talk about young people and old people. Reminds me of a line I read in a mystery novel not long ago by Agatha Christie, a great philosopher, you know, where she said, the young people think the old people are crazy, and the old people know the young ones are. So, of course, what's old and what's young is a relative point. And being relative makes me think of Mr. Einstein, because he was the guy that got this relativity going, I guess, most. And I wanted to read you a statement he made because he's a scientist, he was a scientist, and scientists are above reproach these days in all matters technological and so on. But this is what he said about beauty. He said, the most beautiful thing we can experience is the mysterious. It is the basis of all art and science. Pretty good, huh? So I could just stop there and be ahead. He was no dummy, that's for sure, and he knew what he was talking about. Mendelssohn, of course, the great German architect, did the tower for Einstein, and that was plenty mysterious in its day, and it still is. It's one of the most remarkable buildings ever built, not only in its design, but the fact that it ever got built, because in those days there wasn't any spray jobs going on any place. It all had to be cast out of concrete, and the Germans are very thorough workmen, you know, and if anyone could do it, they could, but when they got up to the first story, they gave up. And he had to finish it in brick, which he hated very much to use because the design was made for the other method of cast concrete. But anyway, he read in Gideon's Space-Time and Architecture about what Gideon thought of the Einstein theory of relativity, and he didn't agree with it at all, and he wrote to Einstein. They corresponded quite often. He said, "Dear Master, I have enclosed what Mr. Gideon said about your theory, and if this is correct, I have never understood your teachings correctly myself. So would you please comment on this and let me know what you would say about it?" And he said he got a letter back from Einstein, which, as usual, talked about what he had for breakfast and about what the cat was doing and all kinds of other things. Never came to the main point till the P.S. in the letter. And it says, "P.S. In reference to the material you sent me from Gideon's Time, Space, and Architecture, all I can say is that it was poorly digested, but magnificently shit." It was safe to say that this day and age. You wouldn't normally have said that. But when Mendelssohn gave a talk at OU one time, he said that, much to everyone's surprise. I don't think it surprises people much anymore, because everybody knows what it is. But anyway, this mysterious thing that he's referring to, that's in art and science, is one of the things that is a very vital quality in art of all kinds. And I still am one of the old-fashioned people who believe architecture is an art. But first of all, we have to have the quality of surprise in doing a building or doing any artwork. It has to surprise us in some way so we will notice it. It doesn't mean it has to be wild. It could be anything from mild to wild. It could be a gentle surprise or something that intrigues us, or it could be something that really knocks us for a loop, something that shocks us. It's getting harder to be shocked all the time, by the way, but it's still possible. But this initial impulse that you feel when you encounter a work of art is one of some form of surprise. Then after that, if that's all there is to it, it wouldn't be too much, would it? Somebody could run in the room here and shoot off a gun, we'd all be surprised, but if they just kept doing it, then it'd become the same old unusual stuff again. So we get used to these surprises, and we need something to sustain our interest in a work of art. In building, we're speaking particularly of architecture now, of course, but it's true of any of the arts. Something that will make us want to know them more, to reward us for our attention in some way. And this is something that we need to sustain after we're surprised, to sustain our interest, to back it up with something genuine, something that's worth noticing it for. It has to stand up under criticism. It has to stand up under this attention it gets. But after that, it has to have something that you don't quite figure out, too. Something that stays mysterious, no matter how many times it's analyzed or how much it's picked to pieces by critics and who try to explain it, or how much we think we know it. It never gives up its secret. It remains mysterious. This is true of nature all around us, isn't it? You never get the number of nature, do you? It's always mysterious. No matter how many microscopes we look through, how much we think of infinity as something way out there someplace, it's also way in this someplace too, isn't it? And it's a very mysterious thing, always, no matter how much we discover about it. The same is true of people. And Debussy one time said, each individual soul is a dark forest where we must walk with the utmost precaution. And so it's a case of having something that this quality of mystery isn't something you work for. You don't say, well, I'm going to make this mysterious. But it's a natural byproduct of something that is genuine and something that is really natural and something that isn't trying to follow fashions which are artificial. So a long time ago I had to make up my mind about this business of fashion. Or what about style? What do you mean when you say Frank Lloyd Wright had a style, or Sullivan had a style, or Mendelssohn had a style, Corbu had a style? What do you mean by that? Well, it often means certain recognizable traits that you can identify with these various artists, and you could tell they did the work. But I thought, well, that lets me out because I don't seem to have any kind of style. I guess I'm not blessed with the greatness that people would have if they had a style, because it seemed to me that rather than having a personal style, it was more desirable in the work to have each thing you do have its own style. And the more I thought about that, the more it seemed that that would be more logical, and to try to have a set of gimmicks that I could produce all the time that would be supposedly my style, but which would be imposed upon the nature of the problem each time I did something. So about that time, I was very fascinated with the work of a man, Erte. I don't know how many of you know him. He was a wonderful artist who did covers and drawings inside of the Harper's Bazaar magazine while I was in high school, and years later, and sometime before that too. E-R-T-E was the name he used. And he had a way of drawing that was very clean, and probably influenced some by Beardsley, but wonderful use of color as well, and very unusual work. But one time, in looking at these just as beautiful designs, I read something that he said about women's fashion, and this was in a woman's fashion magazine. And it said that these women's fashions were deplorable because they dressed all of the women alike regardless of their figures or their personalities and so on. And if it was a slit skirt this year, it was a slit skirt for everybody, you see, no matter what their legs looked like. And so this he thought was bad, and he said that he thought each person should have their own clothing that was for their own personalities and not to try to follow fashions and styles. This seemed strange reading it in a fashion magazine. Then I got to thinking about that, and I said, well, isn't that the same thing I think about buildings, really, that the building should be done each time for the occasion. And so then I began to be glad I didn't have a style, because then I didn't have to worry about it. And I could just do architecture and try to do it each time as if it had just been discovered. Mies van der Rohe didn't agree with this principle at all, and one time he said, I do not think it is necessary to invent a new style of architecture each Monday morning. And I don't either. I think you should invent it every time you do one, as nearly as you can, because it will happen that way if you let it. If you work with the problem, it'll be a new style of architecture, its own style. And I had a man come in the office one day when I was in Frank Lloyd Wright's Price Tower, had my office and apartment, and he wanted to know if I would be interested in doing him a house. And I said, yes, of course. And he looked around inside this apartment, and he looked sort of worried, and he said, but I don't like modern architecture. And I said, well, I don't like a lot of it either. And he said, well, somebody told me that's all you do. And I said, all right, if that's all I do, why did you come to me if you don't like it? And he said, well, they told me you'd do me a good house. And I said, well, isn't that the main thing? What's the difference whether you call it Neo-Egyptian or or what? It can be called anything. And he says, well, what style would it be? And I said, well, your name's Comer, so it would be the Comer style. And so it is the Comer style, and each house is the style of the people that live in it or use it generally. Right now I'm engaged with work with a community where it's in Mineola, so I tell them it's the Mineola style for that community, for that building. But I've never really worried about trying to establish a gimmick or trademark. And we've been through lots of those. Before, I think the first time I came to Auburn here was in 50-something, when it was another school. And I've been here to this school before, as maybe some of you know, some I recognize out here. And you know, we've been through all kinds of epidemics of styles and cliches in architecture. And for one of them, we went through the epidemic of the international. Well, first of all, I'll name the Courthouse Modern. That was the modern building that left off the columns, the Greek columns, and flattened out the classical ornaments. And it was kind of a boxy, classical look, but very low relief. And it was generally referred to at the time as flat-chested modern. And very little in the way of projections anywhere. And then we had the international style, where we had the pipe columns and the pipe rails around. Everything was supposed to look like on a ship, or a streamline some way. And they had usually round corners with glass blocks, very modern. And they usually had 3 bands running around the edges of everything, like tabletops and all that, to make them look more speedy. And that was called That was called 3-band modern. And then after that, Peter wrote a book about Brazil bills. And he was fascinated with the louvers that were borrowed from Corbu, of course. And that became the fashion. And that was referred to as the Brazil bills style. And most of the times you go in and have a few examples of those around. Then they have, after that, they had the grill. That was the Stone Age, when they had perforated grills all over things. And that was a godsend because you could put your windows any place and it didn't matter. And the doors, because you could put this nice veil out in front and screen it. And that was an epidemic till they started using them to hide entrances to service station washrooms and things, and using them for remodeling and all. So then that wore out its welcome. And we had the new sensualism, the new brutalism, and everything was a gimmick, you see, some kind of a thing. And that was before the business about designs that were considered a waste of effort, like they are now by many people. We have minimal painting, the minimal music, the minimal architecture and all that. And then we have the non-painting, the non-architecture, and this. We're in the non-architecture phase now. There certainly isn't much of it around that's being done at present. That is by the proper people. It's still happening all around the country by the underground. But it's not in favor in most of the schools. This is one of the few schools I've been to recently where you actually design buildings and do things connected with design and work on developing your imaginations and thinking of materials and all these things, you see. It's refreshing, I can assure you. And it's one of the few places I feel like I'm among friends. Because in the other places they treat you like you're some kind of a leper or something that is going to pollute the environment. And they mustn't do that, of course. We do try to work on architecture as not only. I'm not trying to belittle the city planning aspects or the large community planning. That's something that we've always had to deal with as much as we could. But people forget that architects can't play God and decide what everyone's going to have to do and how the such and such people will live over here and somebody else will live there and somebody else will live here, and all that. These things have to come about as an organic growth rather than a predetermined pattern. And I think it would be much better if instead of trying to force everything into a straitjacket that's predetermined, that it takes its own natural form. And that's what happens. We may end up with a house that takes a triangular form or circular form or some other shape, but it arrives at that shape. It doesn't start it. It becomes that shape, in other words, because that's the way it works. It may turn out to be symmetrical, and we shouldn't fight it. We should go along with it if it does, and we shouldn't force that to be symmetrical, and we shouldn't force it to be asymmetrical, or any of these things. But we should have enough vocabulary at our command, vocabulary of design, vocabulary of materials, colors, textures, all these things that make it up, structural sense, and all of this to give you the freedom to work with the problems at hand. And it seems like, to me, like the most natural way to work. In fact, it doesn't seem work when you do it that way. It's enjoyable, and it's it's much more healthy, much more constructive. In taking in order to put out, we have to take in. And I think many of you realize, and more of you will all the time, that the world we see around us is only one world. There's a world inside of that world that's there too. And this is a very mysterious world, that word mysterious again, because it's something that has always existed as the inner experience that you could have that we don't usually have. And we have to find it, we have to seek it. It doesn't come and knock us down and say, here we are. And in order to put out something, we have to take in something too, don't we? We can go a long ways taking in nature. We can go a long ways understanding people and animals and our technology today and all these things. But we do need to know what's happening in a creative sense around us and what has happened around us too. And many of us are afraid we'll be influenced by this. We're afraid that we'll lose our own selves in this process if we are interested in what someone else is doing or some other thing. We're apt to regard it as a weakening of our own forces. I don't think you ever need to worry about that, providing that you don't confuse influence and imitation. You can imitate something to produce something while you're studying it. Usually we hope you don't build that, but it's a process of growing where you can learn by imitation. Most of the Oriental people do this. The Japanese artists always started in doing that. They'd choose some master in whatever art it was, and they'd imitate his work. But never would they feel that that was important except just as a process of learning. Here, you see someone copying a Van Gogh painting in a museum, and when they get through, they say, boy, that's even better than Van Gogh did it. You know, that attitude. And they feel they really arrived at something even better, instead of thinking of it as a step to learn something, you see. And so we need to discover the world we live in, really, the real world we live in, those artists, which has to do with the world within the world. And this is the world of creative activity that's going on in all times. It's not a rare thing. It's I think many people are creative. It's rarely that anything comes of it, but I think it's not unusual to be born with that. But it is unusual to survive it, so you can produce it. And that's where we have to really deliver to be an architect or painter, composer of music, or whatever. There was a thing that Max Ernst, a great contemporary German painter, he's 83 now, said, which interested me in this respect, and I'm going to read another quote, this time from Max Ernst. He's talking about when he was younger. He says, seeing was my chief preoccupation when he was young. My eyes were greedy. He had to look at everything, you see. Not only for the amazing world which assaulted them from without, what was outside everywhere, but also for that other mysterious, disturbing world which surged up and melted away in my dreams. You see, this is what I'm talking about. This world, the other. And this is the world you can't analyze, you can't talk about, really. You can only respond to it, like music, like painting, like sculpture, like literature. in any other form of art or science or anything that is related creatively. And you need to be wide awake to all of this that you can take in order to put out, you see. But you don't know just how it happens. It happens so. Another thing Art said in this connection was when a man discovers himself, he is lost. And this means that if you ever can analyze just what you think you are and where you're going and what you are and everything, that you are lost, and that's the end of it. I think that we have to regard all of this as something in the continuous present. There's no time when we can comprehend it all, or when we say we have the answer, and we know just what everything is, and it's all hunky-dory. It isn't that way, ever. And it's all in a sense of a continuous present of relativity. It isn't even in the continuous time sense of this was yesterday and this is today and this is tomorrow, but they're relative in other ways too, aren't they? Rather than as a sequence like that. So we can enjoy and understand something that's very old, or something that's now, or something that hasn't even happened yet, according to me. And it's very interesting to me, if we look in the history, we'll see that, for instance, that the Renaissance period in Europe had a counterpart in Japan and in pre-Columbia America at almost the same time. And how did they do that? There was no communication then that we know of, or any newspapers or TVs or anything, magazines, anything to get the word around, was there? And still, that was in the wind. You see, that same feeling was in the wind in all those different places. When Angkor Wat was built, big temple in Cambodia you've been reading about a lot. It's one of a group of temples that stretch for 35 miles in a big ring. And it's over a mile square. It's not usually talked about in the architectural history books because it's strange. Heathens built it. But anyway, heathens built the Greek temples too, I guess, but they're all right because we have poetry about them and all, but not about Angkor. But when that was built, it was about contemporary with Notre Dame in Paris. And still there again, no one knew the other was happening. And you see, nowadays it's impossible to do anything that isn't almost instantly known all over the world. Even if you don't make the effort to get it around, if it's something of interest and value, it makes its own way. Now, that this rapid communication of ideas happens before the pencils even dry on the paper. It's out, and things are going at a terrific speed in this sense. But I don't think that a creative person has to worry about this, because there's always more where that came from, and he doesn't have to worry about running out or anything. In fact, the longer he lives, if he survives long enough, he'll have more work than he can do, generally, like Mr. Wright had. He had a hard time most of his life, but a good part of it, but finally he outlived the enemy, and he had more than he could do in his old age. And that's an embarrassing state of affairs, too. But people will tell you nowadays that the creative individual has no chance, and everything is gone in a socialistic way, in regard to masses of people, that only groups count, only masses of things count. You see, conglomerates are big groups. And they look on the work, individual work, as being antisocial and downright sinful in many places. They look on the idea of a person being an individual as this, too. And so I think they feel the only way we can have harmony is by having conformity. And they figure if everything looks alike or is apparently alike, that it's supposed to be harmony. But how can you have harmony with just one note? You see, it isn't possible to have a harmony without more than one note, is it? And they say it takes two to tango. Well, it takes more than one note to make harmony. And harmony can result from very dissimilar things. So I can envision a society of people made up of individuals, collective of individuals. Why not? They don't all have to be alike any more than all of the things in nature have to be alike. They all get along, don't they? Look what a collective that is. And still, they usually harmonize. They get along together. And if undisturbed, they preserve a very fine balance. And I think people could too if they had this sense to do this. Why put everyone in the same straitjacket? This doesn't fit. And what does fit? Well, we have to find out that the times change. We say we can't do it anymore because it isn't like the old days when all of the great architects did things, in the old days. Because now we have all these problems that are different. But they had them too. When Wright was starting in as a young man, about the age of some of you people, he had an awful hard time because people wanted their houses in the classical styles, colonial or Old English or Spanish or French provisional or something like that. It had to be some style, didn't it? And it still does, pretty much. Only now they have others they call Mediterranean and things that never existed, but they're sales gimmicks for the people who have to have them. But you see, it isn't much different really today than then. You had to work with big business then. If you did big buildings, you have to do it today if you do big buildings. And D.H. Burnham was a guy that made the famous definition of three important things about architecture: get the job, get the job, get the job. Well, he got them too. And if that's what you want, you can still do it. You can still do individual work if you feel you need to do that. There's enough room to do architecture of all kinds that will still be real architecture if you have the ability to work with your condition. Wright said when he started in, he felt all of this opposition so strongly to anything he wanted to do that he thought that he needed some kind of center line to go by, or some kind of an idea that would keep his head above water. And he ran into it in the philosophy of Thomas Carlyle, a Scotch philosopher. And he said, the ideal is within yourself. Your condition is but the stuff you are to shape this same ideal out of. You see. And isn't that still true? It sounds like lavender and old lace in the original version, but still it's true. Your condition is what you have to make something out of. And if you accept it as something that's so strong that you can't do anything, or that it limits you in any way, too much, then you're just giving up. And he could have given up the same way. The condition's different all the time, but it's still a condition that you have to shape your own ideals out of. And we still have lots of people who want things, and it's rather ironic, I think, that on the one hand, there's more public interest in architecture now than there has ever been in history. There are more people among what we call the civilians who really are interested in architecture. They're not all architects, and they're not all draftsmen, and they're not all freaks. So they in Japan, of course, they're unusual. They've had a history of culture that's very great. But you'll buy all of the architectural publications. Every one of them are sold on supermarket newsstands, just along with the Ladies' Own Companion and the Japanese equivalent and all that. So, you see, the public is interested, and they buy these magazines. And they know about what's happening. And then well, in our country here, there are more and more people buy architectural publications. And of course, we know what they get into with the house magazines, but most of those are just gimmicks to sell stuff with. But still, there are people who are still reading The Fountainhead, and that got a lot of people on the wrong path, you know, to being architects. I remember when that came out, that really shook people up, especially the second chapter. And that was one that promoted the idea that architects had a real great love life of some kind going on. And that was very appealing to a lot of the young gents of the day. So, but we found out, though, that there's more to it than that. And the ideas that are expounded in a book as popular as that, which is still a best-selling paperback, shows a very general interest in reading something about architects and architecture. And it continues, and more architectural publications are coming out. Incidentally, I have never, I've been published ever since I was 14 years old, but I've never once asked for anyone to publish me. I sent anything in to be published. I've never once gone after a job. I wouldn't even know how to get any kind of job. Everyone I've ever had's come to me. And I've never had any social status or pull or political pull. And I don't have any more ability than lots of other people. I do have a little more curiosity than a lot. But I can say that if I could continue to exist with what little I have, what would you be able to do? See? It's a very hopeful thing. Mr. Wright used to say architecture was going over the brink and it was in the gutter. I don't think this is true. In a worldwide sense, there are some very great buildings being built now. And there's a lot from the underground you don't see published in the magazines because they don't use a lot of the advertisers' products. But still, they're being done. And that more and more people want individual homes or individual apartments or individual high-rises or whatever. Not everybody believes that everything should be just a bunch of research and reports. You see, that's what the majority of the schools do now. They never get around to actually doing the building. They think that's a waste of time. You don't learn to draw, that's deceptive. The computers will do it all anyway, they say. Well, computers are great machines, but they're not going to do anything sitting there by themselves, are they? They have to have somebody tickle their keys or punch the buttons or something before they can do anything. Someone has to know what to do. Someone has to have an idea. And this is extremely important. And if you do have an idea, and if you stick to your guns, people will be interested in you. You don't have to advertise or anything like that. They like to feel safe. They feel safe with someone they think has some sense of direction. How would you feel if you were needing medical attention and you went into the doctor and you said, well, let's see, now I could operate on you for appendicitis or gallbladder or heart trouble. Which would you want? You better get out quick, hadn't you? And the same thing happens, though, when you walk into an architect. He says, what style building do you want? Or something like that, you see. You better get out quick, too. Because it's a similar thing. We have to have a professional feeling towards our work. We have to do something that is more than just doing something that everybody else is doing. We have to, if we're not doing anything more than that, then they're justified in hiring engineers or people who don't care about this, or firms who don't care about it. You see, if that's what they want, well, they'll get it. Wright always said, we get the buildings we deserve. Now, I think it's very hopeful. I want to wind up this part out. I want to show you a few slides and comment on them, but I think it's a very hopeful thing, really. And if you can just keep your head above water and get your sense of direction and go that way, well, you're in pretty good shape. I feel there's a very live spirit in this school, and I don't tell that to all the schools either, I'll tell you, because some of them are dead, just completely demised, and not quite buried, but almost. And so I think probably some of it is due to the enthusiasm you feel around you for architecture, and this is contagious, as you know. Well, if we can get the room dark, I'll show you a few things that didn't make it. Now, can you hear this? Right in style. I have a necklace. This is a house I designed in California right after the war, World War II that was called, which was done for an appraiser for FHA. And and he said he was so sick and tired of having houses or walking around, and he could gauge the size of a room by how many paces he could make across the room and all. And he wanted a house where this wouldn't be true. This is the model without the roof. And one of the things one of his hobbies was water gardening. He said, I'd like to live right in a lily pond, but I guess you couldn't do that, could you? And I said, sure. So it was planned to have the rooms raised up above the water, and they would be as sort of island arrangements, and the glass would be a curving plane of glass you'll see on another slide, would define between the garden and the interior, and the same out here. And the walls were a serpentine brick on the sides to shut out the neighbors' monstrosities on each side. This shows the model with the roof, and it hangs out over the driveway for the carport. And this was done about 1946, I think. And you see the trellis around the back there where the patio is. And this is the patio. The glass was this line, and it was suspended from the roof, and the water level of the pool could be lowered below it about half an inch to let the breeze blow across the water and cool the interior. The reason this house didn't get built was not on account of the client. He wanted it, and I wanted to do it. But at that time, all of our materials and labor was gone. It was right after the war, and we couldn't get any material or labor to do it. Here's a house in Illinois done later, probably about 64, somewhere along in there maybe. And this was for a wooded area, and they wanted a swimming pool indoors. They wanted a recreation area and all that. And that's in the lower portion under the other structure above, which is really a continuous ramp, and the room's ramped up up to the living room at that end, and then on up to the music room at this end, with bedrooms along in between there, and a gallery where the ramp was on the other side. This didn't get built because the man's father got in trouble with the IRS, and it took all the family could scrape together to do it, to get him out of it. But this same client, though, has come back to me now and wants to build a bunch of stuff in Pennsylvania, so you see it wasn't a dead herring after all. This is a house that was designed for a rather exclusive community on a lake outside of Kansas City, and it was refused by the Good Taste Committee because it didn't conform with the other houses. We did one that didn't conform anymore, but they got by them after this. This was done for an Italian fellow who wanted to build a motel along a highway near McAllister, Oklahoma. He said he wanted an eye catcher. And he got it, but it scared him to death. This was designed for a man who owned a radio station in Veneta, Oklahoma. And it had the tower over to the right, you see there. And I thought, well, as long as everything around here is nice and light and airy, we'd suspend his house from 3 poles. And he was all set for it, liked it and everything. And we got the working drawing started, and then somebody bought the station from him. And so that meant the site was out, and the site he got after this was one we couldn't use this on because it wouldn't have been right with the neighbors' houses and so on. So I had to junk it then to work out another house for him, which we built. I'm mentioning these things to show you some of the various reasons they don't go ahead. This is a house I designed for Joe Price for the Lake Tahoe area at one time. He wanted it kind of a cottage-looking, rough stone and wood. But that didn't go ahead because he wanted to get some land down near the pier that went out into the lake about a mile, and another scheme had to be worked for that site. This is a house I designed for a rich oil man in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Very pale green marble and anodized light blue aluminum roof and color clear glass. And all the closet doors were sliding slabs of green marble and all that sort of thing. It would have been quite an elegant thing, but the Good Taste Committee in the area wouldn't dig it. So it didn't make it, and it made him mad, and he moved away. This was designed for a man in South America, in Venezuela, on the ocean, and he liked it and was ready to go. In the next election, he was defeated. This was designed for a writer, Al Doolin. He didn't want to call it a house. He called it an departure because he thought it wasn't a house in the sense a house usually is. It had all of the furniture, was really a definite integral part of the house itself, not just loose stuff stuck in later. Indoor swimming pool, and he needed a studio to work in, and his wife needed one to paint and sew in, and needed some kind of gallery. So I made these tubes come up out of the over the swimming pool, come up like a Y shape, comes up inside, and then branches out in those two things that come out through the roof. And his studio was in the end of one, hers in the end of the other. And you see the feather sculptures stick outside the window, so they can turn around inside as well with the wind. The whole roof was aluminum pellets sprayed on a fabric and suspended from this center mast. The black material you see was coal with fool's gold, pyrite, in veins running along rhythmic striations through it. This house was all set to go, and the Korean War came along, and his son, who was definitely a part of this and was going to help him build it, was killed. And so that killed his job. The Crystal Chapel was accepted by the University of Oklahoma for its non-denominational or multi-denominational, whichever way you want to say, chapel. It was stainless steel, pink glass with pink foam for insulation by reflection, and pink Oklahoma granite. And everything was set to go, but the man who was going to furnish them the money, had promised it to them, was declared mentally incompetent by his son because he wanted his father's money. So that was that. Then there were several other people wanted to build this building, and one of the more recent ones was when Martin Luther King was assassinated, and the black people wanted to build it as a memorial to him. And they especially wanted to use this design because they said they wanted to do something that the white people didn't have sense enough to build. But that didn't come about because they couldn't get the money. Now there's a school that is planning to build it. They have a man who's promised them half of the money, and they think they can get the other half. So maybe it'll rise up from the dead yet. But it was done in 49 and 50, and people are still trying to get it built 25 years later. See, sometimes they don't pass on after all. There's a good chance it will get done. And I think we'll be able to do it better now than we could have then, because we have a lot better technology for handling glass and the metal than we did at that time. This was thinking of a sacred place as a place of light rather than a gloomy, dark shadows like most of the cathedrals and such have. Herb Green did the drawing of the interior, by the way. This is a house that was planned for California, where the climate's just ideal, you know. It sticks pretty close to 70, and the idea was a house that could be very informal, and the circulation would be almost like paths leading through the woods, these tall pine trees, and the individual rooms would be sort of like separate pods that could open up, and the one side of this pod could let down and be an outdoor terrace, you see, when it's open with outdoor carpet, and then when it's closed it would be a separate enclosed room. And so it was a house where you could literally live outdoors if you wanted to, or you could live enclosed if you wanted to. And it was an attempt to explore how this could be done. This is one end of the model. It's in a long piece of property. You can see the walk coming up from where the cars park and going along the side, and that weaves around through the woods in a kind of a big S shape where these groups of pods are. The swimming pool is here. And then further up on the hill is what would be called the living area, which is another form. See, it's the furthest thing you see at the top of the picture. You wouldn't be able to see this at see all of it at any one time through the wood, because they're quite thick. The masonry was to be a stone that comes from that area. That's green quartz, green and white quartz. Very beautiful material. And it would also be combined with glass cullets or sparkle. It's a difficult house to show through the slides. They're not too good, but maybe you can get a little idea of it. So one of these opened with the side let down, which extends the house outdoors, the room outdoors, I mean. And they're not bothered with mosquitoes and such past either. There you can see the side of the model. The living room is over to the extreme right. This was a very decentralized plan where it was completely asymmetric in the disposal of the various units. This is the other end of the living room. And there's a ramp that comes down from that, connects with these walks that go around through the woods. Oops. The people accepted that design, but the Good Taste Committee wouldn't. And these Good Taste Committees are really difficult because they have the power to decide usually what can be built in their snob divisions. And they usually want it to look like other things around them. This is a little house in Kansas City that we had a hard time finding property that would allow it to be built. It's triangular in plan, which is enough to scare them to start with. And it was just a very small house. But after we got it built and the people were ready to move in, the town hall architect sent a man over to inform the builder to tell the owners that they couldn't move in until they removed certain objectionable features of this house, mainly these accents of the corner and the frame up over the fireplace. And the reason was that some old ladies that lived in a snootier section out past here had to go by this house on the way, and that offended their eyes to see it. And they complained to the town architect there that something had to be done. These things had to be taken off. And so my client wanted to have a big lawsuit over it and all, but I knew Don Hoffman, the architecture editor of the Kansas City Star and Times, which is the only paper in Kansas City. And I told him about it, and he sent some reporters out to interview the town hall people, and they got scared because they didn't want any publicity of it. Politicians are afraid of it, especially when there's only one paper like that. And so they were saying, well, don't worry, we're not going to enforce that. And, you know, don't bother, it's all going to work out all right and all that. And I told Don that I wish they could do that. I think it'd be great if they could make them take it off, because that would give me the same right to go around and have things removed from houses I didn't like. And this would include shutters that wouldn't shut or wouldn't cover the windows if they did, and weather vanes that didn't point north, and dove coats painted on the wall instead of being real. Oh, you could find lots of cute things to take off, and I think I could have found a lot more of them than they did. This house was done for John Duncan, who's a very famous sociologist, and it was built by a farm laborer just south of Carbondale, Illinois. And the fieldstone was given to him free. The site was just a long sort of ledge. This is just one end of it. Here again, it's impossible to show you the whole house unless you had an air view. But the circular element here is a dining area with a music room above, and maybe some of you have seen plans of this. You notice that the circular openings are the windows, and instead of having the glass set in the stone or engaged in it in some way, the walls are stone inside where they are outside. I set the glass back and put ventilators in the side where they go back, and then we had planters in the sill there. And I didn't have to have any eaves because we didn't need them anyway on account of the trees being so close. But it does give protection to the glass. Here's the detail of one of them. And it does allow you to show the thickness of the wall, the stone wall, without any other materials engaging it. This shows you something of the site from slightly above. And it's integrated all right. It's integrated, it's hard to see. This is in the court back of the center portion of the house. Music room's up above that. There are two of these tower forms and guest space in the center. This is up above the hill looking down on the other end of it. This is the outside of the library and his writing sanctuary, which is in that tower. You see the other one beyond there. And there's a terrace here. He used to teach here with a so-called Socratic method where the students would get around him and they'd discuss things, you see. This shows looking through the window and the skylight inside that lights the stone. I always hate to have interior stone where it isn't naturally lighted because it always has a kind of a dark, clammy feeling. This long passage that runs through the house is the access for it, and the walls curve in and out of that. That's a spiral stairway that goes up to the music room. This is part of his library. He had 5,000 books we had to take care of. That's a combination, reflection and inside shot from outside, so if it puzzles you, that's why. And reflection out in the pond. Here's a greenhouse that was done for an eye surgeon in Kansas City. And we had a hard time getting this built, as conservative as it looks, because it was way out. And it was made of green stained shingles and green glazed brick. The walls are free from the roof, and glass is used between always. Glass covers the interior structure of the posts and beams. You can see that through the glass here, the beams are decorated in this fashion. all the color scheme is carried out in various tones of green. What looks white here is actually a very light green. These beams extend out to the lamps over the terrace. They're made up of ashtrays, by the way. This panel in the door is. People see those and think they're special made glass, must be very expensive. I think they were a dime a piece. This is part of the living room. It's quite a large room, about 30 feet square. The fireplace has a mirror tile panel to reflect the fire, and there are stereo speakers on each side. Carpet was made in various tones of green. Here you see the glass dining table in the room. This house is out in southwestern Kansas, in Sublette. And this fellow is the editor of the newspapers in Dodge City and Sublette and a farm journal. His requirement was he wanted round corners. He didn't want a round house, but he wanted round corners. And he wanted shingles and stone. So the house is sort of introverted around a central court, a patio, because there really isn't much to see, even though it's just as flat as this floor in every direction. But there's a lot of bad-looking barns and things that aren't really good ones around it, so we had to close it in on itself. You'll notice the skylight runs continuously around the perimeter of the house to light the stone walls inside again. You get a little clue of what's around. Oh, well, that's better than anything else that's around it, but there's stuff that isn't so good. One of his own sculptures he does in his spare time. There are very few trees of any size and lots of space. This is in the kitchen. See the skylight carrying around there. Oh, excuse me. We got some more. This is the patio here. I run these through pretty fast because we have to get out of here pretty quick. That's the fireplace in the living room. And there you see how the skylight continues there. This is a bachelor's house out in Dodge City. He's a dentist, by the way. Is it time yet? Okay. I was warned we have to get out of here at a certain time. Anyway, we'll slow it down. You can see this is also out in a very barren area. They say you can see further and see less than anywhere in the U.S. Here's another one out there. Day's house at Beaver, Oklahoma. Their favorite color was red. These cylindrical forms you see are revolving closets here. Stairway goes from the studio up to the living room, which is the top room. It's above up there. It's a ski lodge in Crested Butte, Colorado. It's for 5 clients. One was a rug dealer, one was an interior decorator, one was a district judge, and 2 were psychiatrists. But they never got to use it because they rent it all the time. It rents for $500 a day to big companies that like to have parties there. In the mountains, you go up and up and up, and finally you arrive usually in a little building with a flat roof that comes right down on top of you, or a ceiling that does. I wanted it to keep going on up after you get in there, so you don't feel like you've arrived, you know. This is a house we built in Minnesota for a turkey dealer, and it's located in the middle of a big cornfield. It's the first house to have an outdoor carpet roof. All of this orange material is outdoor carpet. All the boulders and glaciers, all the boulders of granite were washed up by glaciers years and years ago. And they were given to him free because the farmers hate them and they're glad to get rid of them. This is the garage, and there's an entrance on either side. Porch up above the garage. This pavement's in here now at the time these were taken. It wasn't. But it's riding out there on the prairie, long distance to see. You notice the lights here. Every bit of the work was done in this little town near there, about 2,500 people, Mountain Lake, Minnesota. They had excellent carpenters, metal workers, stone masons, anything you wanted right there. This roof, by the way, has been through 4 severe winters now, and it's still in good shape. He called me the other night on the phone and told me not to worry, it was going to work. I did the entrance doors myself, and those are in between 2 pieces of thermopane sealed inside, glass pebbles and various pieces of glass. This is the fireplace in the family room. There are 6 fireplaces in the house, and the natives say there are 16. And the reason there's so many fireplaces is because the architect was an elderly man who never heard of central heating. Dining table. You see the fireplace in the living room, and the speakers are on poles so they can be adjusted at angles. This is part of the living room fountain, and fireplace in the office. That's the fireplace in the parents' bedroom. This is a portion of the living room, a mosaic made of mirrors, planter. This is the balcony. living room itself is here. The balcony you're on is up above there. After he got this house started, his father and mother, who were in their 70s, about 75, decided they wanted a house. And this is their house in town. These are not very good slides, but it's made of shingles. You see the environment, but trees are screening that now, poplar trees will. But you can see the fish scale shingles were used all around the outside and the roof and the inside of the roof too. This was taken in the rain. I don't have any good pictures of it yet. This is the central fountain with a skylight above and planter and seat around over there. A mural of mirrors looking across at the bedroom dining room on each side. This is an overview of Joe Price's house, and I'll just show you some of the recent work done in the addition. There you see one of these opened with the side let down, which extends the house outdoors, the room outdoors, I mean. And they're not bothered